Right, so Israel continues to plumb new depths of depravity, especially in the "we can do what we like, we're untouchable, and if you don't agree with us, you're clearly anti-Semitic" stakes. And nothing quite nails that on than literally passing an international war crime into Israeli law, does it? That is pretty brazen even by their obnoxious standards. But this is no ordinary war crime, because the criminal act in question is committed by simply daring to have the temerity to resist the 57-year-long occupation of the Occupied Palestinian Territories, to resist that occupation, and the punishment isn't just going to be levied upon the person who carried it out. Oh no, that apparently isn't nearly sufficient enough. No, the punishment must be meted out on the entire family of the allegedly guilty party. Collective punishment is the sentence, a war crime. But what form that collective punishment is to take is a whole new level of unhinged for Israel, and the potential consequences of that is enough to make your blood run cold. Right, so Israel have a new law, and you won't be surprised to learn it constitutes a war crime, perhaps. It is to be meted out against anyone resisting the occupation of the Palestinian territories, despite, of course, the International Court of Justice having passed an advisory ruling that Israel's occupation of Palestine is now illegal in and of itself. But since when does Israel take any notice of what anybody else says or thinks, right? Criticise them, though, and you're clearly a racist. We all know that shtick by now, don't we? But this one is so nasty, there's actually a very good chance Israel's own Supreme Court will actually ditch it. It's that bad. And of course it would be when we are considering the matter of collective punishment here. The law that has passed its final hurdle in the Knesset by being voted through by 61 votes to 41 was proposed by one of Netanyahu's own Likud party, Hanok Milvitsky, and it amounts to charges against anyone who resists Israeli occupation, anyone involved in armed resistance, who will, if found guilty, now face deportation. Not only will they face deportation, however, but so will any first-degree relatives of that alleged perpetrator, which could include parents, siblings, children, and spouses. This was actually watered down at one point from the all family members being deported. How big is your family tree? How many people can we get rid of, perhaps? But as you can imagine, could very well lead to the breakup of families anyway. For example, if a sibling can be deported, but their children cannot, then it's just unhinged, isn't it? Those first-class relatives of the alleged terrorist can be deported as well if they knew of their plans and did nothing to prevent it, or even more opaquely, still be deported if they are deemed to have expressed sympathy or support for the acts the perpetrator stands accused of. This could also include Israeli citizens, it should be noted, though in standard apartheid state manner, even the sentences for them are lighter. Deportation for them could last anywhere from between 7 and 15 years, but for a non-Israeli citizen, they could be deported for between 10 and 20 years. Now you may or may not be wondering at this point what counts as a non-Israeli in terms of this law. You might rightly assume it to be Palestinians. You might assume it is all Palestinians. But that's actually not the case. And when you might immediately turn your thoughts towards Gaza and think, oh, it must be another way to get rid of all the people in Gaza so Israel can seize more land, perhaps, that isn't the case either. This law is solidly aimed at Palestinians living in Israel and East Jerusalem, it would seem. It was not clear if this would apply to all Palestinians in the West Bank as well, because one of the places that may be deported to is actually the Gaza Strip itself. That does somewhat underline the ridiculousness of this plan, which has, as I've said, already passed, because Gaza is now hell on earth. Israel have now partitioned parts of the north of Gaza for themselves, seemingly. They have raised the Gaza Strip from one end to the other. The main aid agency has been outlawed from delivering aid to Palestinian people trapped there. Where is Israel planning on putting more people if they deport some there now as well? More of the general's plan needing to be meting out, so those small colonies where the Gazans are going to be permitted to live in Gaza will have to be built, I suppose. However, equally, Israel don't necessarily say it will definitely be Gaza at all. So if not there, then where? But actually this law gets even worse, because there was an add-on to it, which passed by 55 votes to 33. And this meant that any Palestinians could be defined as a terrorist in the eyes of Israeli law from the age of just 12. Here's an excerpt from Anadolu Agency explaining that bit. The legislation, a temporary 5-year measure, allows courts to order the detention of children under 14 in closed facilities if convicted of murder involving terrorism or terrorist activities. Upon reaching 14, the child would continue to serve their sentence in prison, according to the statement. The measure could be extended by up to 2 years upon approval from the Justice and Welfare Ministers and the Knesset's Constitution Committee. The law also includes a 3-year provision allowing courts to jail minors in prison instead of juvenile facilities for up to 10 days if they are deemed dangerous or pose a threat to others. Courts may also extend this period if circumstances warrant, the Knesset said. More than 270 Palestinian minors are currently held in Israeli detention, despite UN resolutions and international treaties prohibiting the imprisonment of children, according to Palestinian rights groups. Well, yet again, that's another failure of the UN to not enforce its own rulings and its own prohibitions and its own treaties, isn't it? It is an absolutely monstrous action being taken in addition to another monstrous action by a national parliament in this day and age, but it's par for the course for the genocidal state of Israel. Kids labelled as terrorists, kids as young as 12, threats to others they could be put into an adult prison, facing prison or even deportation, and their wider families too, of course. This combined with another law that passed the other day to strip East Jerusalem schools of their funding if the Education Ministry suspect a terrorist act is being planned there, the claim being that minors get incited against Israel there. Nothing to do with perhaps living in a divided city and under occupation, of course. But we've seen a cluster of laws all aimed at East Jerusalem all of a sudden here. So is there a plan afoot to seize the rest of the city of Jerusalem for Israel now as well? Perhaps they'll build somewhere for them to go. Something perhaps along the lines of what the Social Equality and Women's Empowerment Minister May Golan suggested a short while ago. Do keep in mind her job title there, Social Equality and Women's Empowerment, because it is rather relevant given that she suggested a good example of where to put people was Guantanamo Bay. Sure, send them to an Israeli version of Gitmo, but where are you going to build it? Gaza or somewhere else? It's hardly the inspiration I'd pick, but you can see how it might appeal to Israeli politicians. Who cares if there are innocent people that might get locked up there, right? They're Palestinians. But if there are any such plans of that sort, they'd have to get past the Israeli Supreme Court, and it seems that there, at the very least, even this monstrosity of a legal move is likely to prove too much to accept. Israel have tried to legislate deportations before, and the Supreme Court has always struck them down, done so on the basis of them being unconstitutional. But we've never seen an Israeli administration this unhinged before either. And I just can't see them not pushing ahead anyway, since when does Benjamin Netanyahu or the mad people in his coalition ever accept being told no by anyone? Of course, we all know who should be saying no, don't we? Literally everyone else. Where are our media? Where are our political leaders? Why are they not saying no? That this isn't going to fly. Think again. Why are we leaving it up to Israel's own courts to throw out Israeli legislation when we all have a role in the upholding of international law and deportations to goodness knows where and collective punishment in and of itself being illegal? Say Israel decided to deport them outside of their territories and outside of Palestine somewhere, and they end up finding their way to the beaches of France to, jump into a small boat. What will Keir Starmer have to say then? What will David Lammy have to say? Israel has a right to defend itself as the boats head towards our coast? Well, they're not saying anything on this story at all. Their heads are firmly down, as per usual. But I remember Starmer couldn't get to a podium fast enough when Israel came under attack by Iran, that latest retaliation. But when it's Palestinians, it's always a different story. Well, at least when the first family gets deported to Gaza, Starmer and Lammy won't be able to stand there and claim that they've seen no evidence of Israel committing collective punishment, because here it apparently comes. We can hope that the Israeli Supreme Court does indeed strike this down. It seems the ball is very much going to be left in their court. There's nothing more gratifying, of course, than seeing Itamar Ben-Gvir flip his lid or Netanyahu wander off in a sulk. But fundamentally, this is the most vicious, hard-right Israeli administration there has been. Cobbled together just to get Netanyahu back into power, no matter how right-wing and racist and positively bloodthirsty as they've clearly been. The world continues to fail to address it as our leaders and our media stand in silence over this story. Very little press coverage has come out, and what there has been in Western sources has hardly been an outcry against it. Dangerous precedents the world over keep getting set as Israel keep being permitted to do stuff like this without censure. Alternative and foreign media are carrying the load for what is right and decent right now, as they have been easily for the last year, absolutely for far, far longer than that. So do expand your media horizons beyond Western sources, please. Inform yourself far better. and absolutely support your favourite independent media doing the job the overpaid stenographers of our billionaire press barons should be doing, but aren't, to keep being able to do so if you can. Meanwhile, here's another example of the influence of the Israel lobby and Western goings-on, as it appears they are now in a position to get our Met police force to make arrests at pro-Palestine demos. Point them out and watch them go. Just what is going on here, and why are the Met taking orders from marshals who are supposed to be minding a pro-Israel counter-protest? It's all on film. Check out this story in this video recommendation as your suggested next watch. I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.